As many of you know, I was away for a couple of weeks, and part of that time was in Barbados. If you don't know where Barbados is, you see the red arrow pointing to where the weather I enjoyed was better than the weather you had here. You'll see that Barbados, sort of an outlying island there on the, I think, Lesser Antilles. But you'll see down at the bottom of the map there, Venezuela. And so while we were in Barbados, distracted with all things related to weddings, every now and again we'd have news filter in about what's going on in the world. And so while we were there, that's when the President of the United States ordered the bombing and of Venezuela and Caracas, and the arrest of the President of Venezuela. And there was this one point where one of the young people involved in the wedding, before we got to the wedding, but rehearsal and stuff, saying, so wrapped up in this wedding stuff, I forgot that there's other things going on in the world. It was a bit of a shock to the system to be reminded that while we're at rest, things are happening in the world. Now, I say this next part not to suggest that somehow it had an impact on us. We're safely in Barbados. But the activity in Venezuela had an impact beyond Venezuela. While we were checking the status of our flights, the airport at Barbados issued its warning that flight schedules may be disrupted due to unforeseen circumstances. And it was just that little taste that, yes, it's easy to live in a bubble when things are happening in the world. One of the conversations that came up from all of that, again, there's a variety of young people there, and they're 20-somethings, 30-somethings, but conversations about where's the line? Where's the line between thoughts and prayers when something horrible happens, and stepping up and stepping forward to do something about it, to get a little flesh into the game? A conversation, where young people were obviously wondering, what's the world that we are inheriting? And easy for someone in my place in life to just dismiss that. I can see the trajectory to my retirement and my old age, and things that happen in the world may have an impact on others, probably not going to have much of an impact on me. Contrasting that to, again, these young people saying, where does it stop? And what do we do about it? The church, sure, you can say something from the pulpit, but where's the line for when you step up and you step in to protest with more than just your words, but with action? For younger people, I think is a different metric for understanding where that tipping point is. That tipping point between, I'm sure this will all be resolved at the midterm elections. So voting, that's something that will solve this. Or it's easy for us to say, I'll just stand in the pulpit, I'll give a sermon. Or you can write to your politicians when things are going wrong in the world. Versus seeing all of that being ineffective. All of that amounting to nothing. That something's happening in the rules of the game that don't allow the usual forms of participation to impact the outcome of the game. What's the tipping point to turning protest from something that's verbal or thoughts and prayers to stepping in with your body? And that's what we're watching on TV right now happening in the States. And sure enough, we're watching some people behave badly in terms of how they protest with their bodies. That gets the news. But we're seeing people saying, the line has been crossed. What do we, as the church, have to say about that? Now, the story that we read today is, well, we can see it as a protest story. It's hard to make out, but I'll point out some things. Here's just one artistic rendering of Jesus clearing the temple. You see him there with his braided whip up high. You see people scattering there in the temple, animals and money changers and just all kinds of chaos. And we can't understand what Jesus is up to in terms of protest in this story without realizing that he's taken some steps before this on his way to Jerusalem. You'll see there a rendering of John the Baptist there with the staff, and he's pointing to Jesus. And John the Baptist is telling his own disciples, this is the one. This is a rendering of the first apostles following Jesus. And then, again, hard to see, but I'll describe it. You have the wedding at Cana. You have the steward of the wine there bent over the purification jars, and you have Jesus performing that miracle. There in Galilee, the region, in this place called Cana, his people, and he's getting on the map. Those things happen before Jesus gets to Jerusalem. Some things happen specifically. Jesus gathers some people around him. He connects with people who are not at the center of the game. They're kind of left out. They're not as important. And then he travels to Jerusalem, visits the temple, and we have the story of the clearing of the temple. Let me just compare that to what political science literature has to say about protest, the steps towards that tipping point. What Jesus does is, before he takes any action, he gathers this core group around him, his disciples. If we look at the world right now, we look at young people and older people, but young people worried about their world, you see one or two leaders just starting to gather. People of like mind around them who are not happy with the way the world is going. Then we have in the middle part what's called bridging outsiders. Jesus is in Cana, in Galilee. They're outsiders, like they're way up north, separated from the centers of power. They've got even lesser people, according to the Jewish faith, the Samaritans, between them. They got to travel through all of that just to get to influencing the world. Jesus makes connections with those people so that he's bringing them, so to speak, with him to Jerusalem, to the temple. And then and only then do we get this public protest. Jesus has moved from associating with people to influencing people, having something to say, getting to the point where he steps in and he says, this has to change. This can no longer happen. Here's the question that I had to wrestle with in this conversation with young people while I was down in Barbados. What does discipleship mean? What does it mean to follow Jesus? When we're comfortable in life, following Jesus means I'll say some things, I'll write some letters, I'll work passively behind the scenes to influence. Because, that's how we understand the world. We know if we don't like something that's happening here in Caradoc, we know who to call, we know where to show up, we know who to talk to. Don't need to do any protests. We're part of the system. To follow Jesus as a disciple, to bring the good news to the world, well, we just need to talk to the right people. But when young people take a look at the world that's happening today, they're seeing the part of this story of following Jesus that involves braiding a whip, knocking over tables, clearing out spaces. This is a most uncomfortable story for those of us who are followers of Jesus Christ, who are comfortable in this world that works for us. And so we skip over it, and there's always part of me, it's like, I don't want to preach on this passage. But as I'm there in Barbados, and I'm talking with these young people, I'm realizing that if I say to them, following Jesus as a disciple, yeah, it's thoughts and prayers. Well, that means nothing to them. To follow Jesus includes stepping into the theater of action. To follow Jesus means that sometimes we have to turn over tables and we have to put ourselves in harm's way. Easy for us to talk about this morning because we're safely north of the border. But it does beg the question, what does it mean to be disciples of Jesus Christ in a world that's turning upside down? To follow Jesus is not only about doing things that are passive. I'm going to vote. I'm going to write letters. But sometimes following Jesus means you have to step into the places where the good news needs to be lived out. And that is not a spectator sport. It comes with risk and it comes with potential cost. Let me wrap up with this story from Nazi Germany back in, I think it was around, leading up to 1943. This is a picture of Sophie Scholl. And she, like so many of her generation, like her brother was part of the Nazi youth. She was in the girls' wing of that growing up, eventually getting into university, when she was exposed to ideas that said it's not enough just to sit by passively and to name when injustice is happening. And so she and her brother were involved in anonymously printing pamphlets that were challenging what Hitler's government was doing. And they would, in very stealth ways, leave those pamphlets in books in the library, in public places, but again, doing it anonymously. And then one day, Sophie just decided, while they were in a public meeting that had a walkway overlooking an atrium, to take the suitcase of pamphlets that she was holding and just dump out the remaining ones to flutter down to the floor below. And when she did that, again, stepping into a more public way of expressing herself, one of the custodians, who was a member of the Nazi Party, saw her, which led to her capture and her brother's capture and arrest. At her trial, She said this: somebody, after all, had to make a start. What we wrote and said is also believed by many others. They just don't dare express themselves as we did. Jesus in the temple was certainly doing something that expressed what many people were concerned about, but on their own were reluctant to speak up and do anything about. As followers of Jesus Christ, there are those moments where we have to be the first ones to step into the world where it needs the good news, into those places of pain in our community, into those places of poverty in our community, in those places of injustice in our community. We're called as followers of Jesus Christ to step into those places and to take risks that have an impact on our safety and our well-being. To follow Jesus Christ, to grow spiritually, includes doing more than thoughts and prayers. Sometimes it means protesting with our lives. Amen.